Well, this chapter introduces us to the brown-nosed shit-eater of the flashback named Spandam from CP5, and I already dislike him.
One Piece chapter 355, Spandam.
What the hell? Sounds like a damn spandex-made condom.
Oh boy, it's heating up even in the flashback. Well, hello my brothers and sisters of the Nerd Nation. I, as always, am Jim, here to bring you another review on the awesome and flashback-heavy, action-focused tale of One Piece. Our last chapter, as a matter of fact, the last couple, of course, have been a flashback to 22 years ago and kind of showing us the backdrop in the history of Tom, the legendary Tom, and his company of Tom's workers. So, at the end of last chapter, we wound up seeing, after 10 years, he was given that judicial pardon, I guess, so he could build the train, and then they were going to kind of revisit the whole thing and see, whether he should still be executed or not. And we saw the Puffing Tom take its maiden voyage. That's how the chapter left off, and this chapter winds up picking up pretty much right after that. It explains to us that they wound up building, over the next 4 years, tracks to the other 3 islands. And the problem is, though, and what we see within the first couple pages, is that other islands realize that Water 7 is pretty much screwed and out of supplies for everything, so they basically just raise the price on anything they need, timber or iron or whatever. They just pretty much screw them and bend them over a barrel, and they actually use that term because they can right now. And anyway, and then Tom and Iceberg are talking about this, and Tom's just like, listen, man, you can only do what you can do. Men are going to be how men are. Humans are going to be how humans are. Eventually they'll come around and things will sort itself out, And what he's saying is it's just like with the whole thing about whether it's a pirate ship or whatever. You can't dictate or worry about what type of ship it is you're going to build. You're just building a ship that is good and that is sound and that, and it's the same type of thing with this, We built something that will be able to increase the trade and the commerce and everything like that amongst the islands. And everything else is going to have to fall in place on its own, you know what I mean? He's not a politician. He's not a person that's going to be able to work on these things or strong arm or lobby with this island or that island, So I thought that was very cool. The whole point of this chapter, though, they introduced this member from CP5, and his name is Spanda, I believe. Spanda or Spanda. I'm going to say Spanda, though. And he's this goofy-looking dude that for some reason has like this darker colored-in nose, and I don't know if that's to signify that it's like a brown nose because he's got his nose so far up the Gorosei, the 5 elders' asses, or Gorosei, I forget exactly how you pronounce that. But anyway, his whole deal is that he's there asking about the blueprints, right? So obviously it's already gotten word around that that Tom has made some kind of blueprints for some kind of immense battleship. Supposedly this thing already exists, though, so at least that's what people have been telling me and everything else. I don't know if it was already built and he still has the blueprints to it or hasn't been built yet. I'm not really sure. What I do know is that if we go and we take the 22 years in the past that we went, and then we jump 10 ahead. Now we're only 12 years in the past, but then we go and we take 4 more for finishing the tracks. Now we're 8 years in the past. And if you connect all the dots in the timelines, that's when Franky, Cuddy Flam, was supposedly killed in some kind of accident or whatever. So I'm hoping that that'll come to fruition and they'll tell us what happened, how he became a cyborg, why he became a cyborg. That's kind of what I'm looking forward to. But anyway, so this ding-a-ling from CP5 and his motley crew is his merry band of fools. First he winds up showing up and he actually winds up getting hit. He actually gets hit by the salute, the send-off from one of Franky's battleships that he's working on. And Franky winds up finally being able to bag a Sea King, 100-meter long Sea King, and he keeps building these kind of weapons of mass destruction, and now he's on like, I don't know, the 35th, 36th. Battle Franky 35, 36. And Iceberg goes and explains to him, this is kind of like the whole Spider-Man thing where Peter Parker's uncle talks to him. He says, with great power comes great responsibility. He explains to Franky, or he asks Franky, he says, what, you're letting all these weapons pile up. What's the deal, These things are dangerous, And Franky says, well, I would never use them to hurt anybody. And he says, it's not about your intent. And this is where that great power comes great responsibility type thing. You have created these things and brought them into the world, and you just hope that nobody bad or with bad intention is going to take them or use them for evil. You have to have a plan of action. You know what I mean? You can't just go creating these things. It's like I'm sure the person, I'm sure that when the atom bomb was created, wasn't sitting around proud of himself after they were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And you can get in debates that are not for this video about wars and everything else, and obviously they're evil, harmful, hurtful things. That sometimes people say they're necessary, some people say no, they're never necessary. The bottom line is, though, is that it really is one of those type of situations where just because you're this great shipbuilder, because you have this great mind for building things like Franky does, doesn't mean that you should and then allow those things to maybe be used against you and what have you. So that's what I took from that whole thing. Nonetheless, what we wind up having have happen is after, you know, he tells them, I don't know shit, get out of here, you know. He tells these CP5 agents, Spandam and his merry men, to get the hell out of there. And he says, oh, don't you understand? I know what your ties are to the Pirate King and building his ship and everything else. And he's like, dude, what is your problem? That ship has already sailed. They're aware of it. I had a trial for it. I was temporarily acquitted, and it's not new news. You can't hold that over me. Get the hell out of here. So he kicks him out. And then we go and we see this Spanda, and we see him actually talking with the 5 elders, and him kind of getting the go-ahead to kind of head up this project and do whatever he wants. And it's the whole do whatever he wants in being able to try in the hopes that he can get the blueprints for this super weapon. And they're talking about, you know, and it's the banner of justice we have to be showing for people. And we have to possess all the greatest weapons because we're trying to make everything safe, you know. And, you know, in theory that's great, but you know, I'm kind of in the theory of like it shouldn't exist to begin with, you know what I mean? Something like that should just be destroyed and forgotten and lost. Anyways, I don't even know why Tom hangs on to these blueprints for it. I'm hoping they'll eventually, you know, it'll eventually come to light. But he sits down later on and has a meeting with, and this is when he entrusts the blueprints to Iceberg and to Franky, or Cutty Flam, or whatever you want to call him at that point. But he winds up entrusting them to them, and Iceberg understands the severity of it, and obviously this is a hush-hush type of thing, and Franky's like, dude, let's build it, you know? So again, it's that thing of really kind of, you know, he's got a lot of, you know, a lot of energy, no direction, you know? You really, you gotta calm down, you gotta sit and think, brother. Is that a good thing to do? It's probably not. So anyway, the chapter closes up shortly after that, but we wind up having, we know obviously the CP5 guy, now that he's kind of gotten the go-ahead from the elders, we know he's going to be hot on Tom's trail and up his ass. That's why Tom entrusted the blueprints. So Franky gets up the next day, and he's going to go into town for some things, and Kokoro's like, oh, but what the hell, you know, we're going to, you know, she gets everybody else up, and it's the day of the trial, the acquittal trial, hopefully, right, for, you know, the judiciary ship is coming back. And even the judge is talking, and he's talking to everybody, and he's talking to one of his guys, and they're like, oh yeah, did you see that sea train? He's like, yeah, it's a modern marvel, you know, I wrote it the other day. So he'll definitely be acquitted now, you know, because he didn't just blow smoke out his ass. He said he was going to do something, and everybody thought it was impossible, but he still did it, right, in lieu of, hey, you're going to be killed when you're done with this, so we're going to give him a break on this one. We're going to let him slide on the whole I built the Pirate King ship. It isn't like he knew, right, or we presume that he didn't know, or he just didn't care. But, and they already said in the last chapter that normally, under normal circumstances, people could not be held liable or responsible for something like that. But this was a special exception they were making because it was the Pirate King. So they changed the rules as it is, just to, you know, so they can change them back. Anyways, as this trial's about to go and commence and what have you, all of a sudden, all hell starts breaking loose. There's cannonball fire coming from somewhere. We wind up seeing the cannonball fire is coming from, there's a number of Franky's different battleships that already earlier in the chapter, Iceberg warned him about these things. And again, with great power comes great responsibility. You should have been dismantling these fuckers after you built them, and then we're going to go on to the next one. So there wasn't a whole fleet of them. So there's like a ton of them lined up over there, just cannon fire, barrage. And to make it look, obviously, like Franky is doing this, or Cutty Flam, you know, or Tom's workers and whatnot are attacking, which makes no sense whatsoever. Why the hell would you actually do that? And come to think of it, this whole Cutty Flam thing to begin with, I don't know what the deal was, because these are always called, all the ships are called the Battle Franky 8, the Battle Franky 9. So anyway, I'm sure we'll get into that pretty soon. But the chapter winds up ending off with, you know, just showing the snicker and sneer of this little shit over here. And honestly, I don't know if his nose is supposed to be colored in like that because he's a freaking clown, or because maybe, I don't know, maybe he's got allergies, or he does a lot of cocaine and it's red all the time. But as far as I'm concerned, this is black and white, but this should be, if it was in color, this should be brown, because he's got his nose so far up the world government's ass, always just looking to further himself in his career. There was also a point, too, that I forgot to mention, and I think it's pretty significant, or at least it will come to be significant, where Nico Robin's wanted poster is pulled out, and this is after after the plans are entrusted to Iceberg and to Franky. And he went and says, there's one more thing, and you see this picture of Nico Robin. So I don't know how that's going to play in either. But all I know is that obviously it looks like there's a pretty good framing job going on over here. And if I know, you know, if what in the past happens here in the present, you know, as far as the way that this story has gone so far, it's going to wind up being one of those things where, you know, people are just undoubtedly going to be like, oh yeah, it must have been him. At the end, Tom's rushing around, though, and telling Iceberg, hey, we got to stop this stuff. You know, we got to try to dismantle these things or whatever we got to do to get them to stop firing. But I think ultimately they're going to be framed, and that's how Tom will wind up getting executed or killed. If he is even dead, I don't know. You know, maybe he just gets run off or something. But my chapter question for you, though, brothers and sisters, is really, what are your thoughts on this this CP5 agent, this Spandam guy? You know, your thoughts on that, and I really would just like to know. And I don't want to get too much of his background, but I mean, it just, like I said, really seems like people have got their head on backwards with things. And the other thing, too, that I would like to ask as a secondary question, not just what you think of Spandam, he was a new character that was introduced, so I always ask those type of questions, but what are your thoughts on how this all ties into Nico Robin, and how this is going to come to pass with Nico Robin, because I don't quite understand the timeline entirely about when the ship was, so obviously the ship must have already been built, I'm guessing, and he has plans for it, so you could build another one, and that's what the government wants. I'm a little bit fuzzy on some of this stuff, so, you know, as long as we're not getting into too heavy a spoiler territory, if somebody could lay out the timeline a little bit for me, I'd appreciate it. If not, and it does get too spoiler heavy, no big deal. Maybe I'll find it out in a few chapters or a few dozen chapters. So, but leave your answer to the question in the comments down below. Feel free to hit the thumbs up, the like button if you should think that I deserve it, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. We will look forward to catching all of you in the next one, Nation.
Please remember to show your patronage by following me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and my other channel.